Hello and welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Stephen Ryan.
And I'm Matthew Lucas, and we do post every week on a Friday, so do hit subscribe if you want to follow our continuing horticultural adventures, Stephen.
What a good idea.
And what could that be this week?
This week we're going to talk about climbing plants, but from all sorts of different angles. Instead of just hiding the shed, hiding the fence, perhaps even hiding your house, you can use climbers in lots and lots of different ways, and we're going to look at some unusual ones. We're going to look at different ways of using them and even how to combine them.
Which is, and I will reveal this, that before I knew Stephen, I actually heard him talking at a garden event nearby, actually.
Yep.
And you were talking about growing things seasonally through other things.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'd never heard of such a concept. So I'm glad that we're going to dive into this, because I think it's one of your things.
Well, it
Cunning
is.
creeper work.
Yes, I like not to waste space.
Exactly. And if you've got a small garden, use every bit as often as you can.
Exactly.
Well, I think the first cab off our interesting creeper rank is just over there.
Yes, let's go and have a look at it, shall we?
Let's go. Exhibit A, Stephen. So the story with this is that I was getting out of my car a few weeks ago filming, and it's now winter, and this is a deciduous tree, and I suddenly said to Stephen, what is that? So Stephen, tell us all, what is this?
All right, this is a remarkable plant. It comes from the Canary Islands. It's a thing called Simile androgyny. Now, Semele was the mother of Dionysus.
Oh, so she liked to drink.
Yeah, yes, so she liked to drink. And of course, the father was Zeus, so, you know, very important Greek mythology getting on here.
Tricky family dynamic.
It is. Androgyny, which I'm not sure Simile would have been pleased about, means that you have got basically both sexes. So, there you go.
It doesn't need a friend.
Apparently, it's got male and female parts in the flower, which is unusual for this group of plants because, believe it or not, that is basically a climbing asparagus.
What?
So, yes, it's in the asparagus family. And anybody who's grown asparagus in their gardens will know that you need boy and girl asparagus if you're going to get berries on the girl asparagus.
Aha.
And it's the same with ruscus, which is another plant. Well, now you do. So most of the plants in the asparagus family do need male and females, but Simile doesn't. Having said that,
yes,
mine has never fruited, and I wonder whether it, although it has male and female parts in the flower, it might in fact need a cross-pollinator, so I need to find a friend with another Simile that I can pinch some pollen from.
And is there such a friend?
There is, but they're about 2 hours drive away from here.
So you have to do a mercy dash with pollen.
Yes, and hopefully bring some of theirs back to my plant as well. So,
would you seriously do that?
of course I would. I mean, I'm an obsessive. Why wouldn't I do that? The other thing you need to know about Simile, I guess, is that what looks like foliage is in fact modified bracts. So they're leaf-like bracts. So they're not true leaves at all. And the flowers actually form around the edges of the bracts.
Right.
So you get these tiny little creamy lemon flowers that run around the edges. And if in fact I get seed on it, you get berries that hang around the edges of what looks like the leaf, and it's the most bizarre look. I actually saw my very first Simile. I've seen it in the wild, by the way. Ooh, I've been to the Canary Islands. But I saw my very first Simile growing in a garden in Ireland called Fota, and it was growing in a nice warm sort of walled garden over in a corner, and it had berries all over it. So I'm still wondering whether mine might in fact not be just a bit young.
And we made a collaborative video with Rachel at Gardening and Duensa, and one of the reasons we did that is there is so much crossover between Melbourne and the Victoria region and Ireland climatic-wise. Obviously Ireland has more rainfall and we have warmer summers, but we can grow a lot of the same things.
Hence Simile.
Yeah.
So anyhow, it's still an open book as to whether I'll get seed on my Simile. I hope I will one day, because I don't know any other way I'm going to propagate it.
Yeah.
So I do need it to set some seed on it. And of course it looks very ornamental when it seeds on it.
And so back to our theme about using creepers in an interesting way. What is this growing up?
Well, it's growing up a prunus, so a
Which
flowering
is just
cherry.
Becoming
There's a few little flowers on it. Those who want to know everything, that's actually Prunus subhertella autumnalis, and it does throw the odd flower throughout autumn, winter, and into early spring. So it's quite a useful little tree, but it's not overly exciting during the winter months. So the Simile dresses it.
Interesting. And if you were going to do this, what are the things, because we need to point out, of course, this is hard to find, is it not, Stephen?
Yeah, you're not going to buy one anywhere in Australia as far as I know. But, you know, that's what I do. I try and collect rare plants. So
if you wanted to sort of replicate this, what other things or what do you need to bear in mind growing an evergreen creeper through a deciduous tree?
All right, well the Simile is fantastic for this job because it's actually an evergreen perennial, so it's not a woody plant.
Yeah.
So the stems, once they've grown up to their full height, stop. So they don't keep going like, say, an ivy might do or some of those other plants.
Right.
So there's a finite height to which it can grow. So I've married my Simile with a plant that is of appropriate size.
Yeah.
The Simile's not going to get big enough to swamp the cherry,
Yeah.
and the cherry's not going to outdo the Simile. So there's this nice balance happening.
So that's what you've got to figure out, wherever you are in the world, whatever species you've got access to find one that is...
Yeah, appropriate to the plant. I always say you wouldn't grow a wisteria on an azalea.
No.
You know, so you need to have an appropriate climbing plant for the host that you're going to grow it through. And that's the thing that always frightens people. They're always going, oh, I can't grow a climber through my plant. It will swamp it. That's the thing people always say. But if you select the right climber,
Clever choice.
it won't.
Well, I think, is that not an interesting segue to our next interesting use of creepers?
Exactly, because we've got another climate that might need a little more management than the Simile, but would also make a really good plant to grow up other plants.
Okay, let's go and have a look. Stephen, beneath a eucalypt.
Yes,
So,
a large one.
Tell me why.
Well, again, I've used a climbing plant,
Yes.
a fairly classical one
Yeah.
that's well known, but in a slightly different way, and that is to grow a Virginia creeper, which of course is completely bare at the moment, up the side of an old eucalypt. And it's working really well.
Yes, now we've got footage of this Virginia creeper in autumn with its fabulous colour, which will drop over this. So talk to me then about the reasoning, because first thing to bear in mind, particularly if you're not in Australia or familiar with Australian trees, is that eucalypts are famous for shedding their bark.
A lot of the eucalypts do in fact have quite sheddy bark, so
Yeah.
it does actually stop self-clinging climbers from really getting their head up. But I have to say this one is a self-clinging climber that's managed to grab a hold of the bark and it's run itself up and it now elegantly drapes out of the tree. So Virginia creeper is one of those that if you've got a largish tree, it's not going to do it any harm. And being self-clinging, you don't have to have infrastructural wire or something like that running up the tree to get the plant up into where you want it.
Yeah. So obviously eucalypt is evergreen,
Yeah.
and so you get the autumn foliage change. Could you grow it up a deciduous tree?
Oh yes, yes, and in fact if you are careful, Virginia creeper is one of the harbingers of autumn, so it tends to colour rather early.
Yeah.
So if you plant it through a deciduous tree, as often as not your Virginia creeper will colour first,
Aha.
and that will shed,
Yeah.
and then of course your deciduous tree will come into its own. Or you could pair it with something that has a different coloured leaf so that you get the juxtaposition of a yellow autumn coloured tree with the red of the Virginia creeper.
Stephen, you're an artist, an artist.
The possibilities are almost limitless.
And we actually made a film about the grape family, which includes Virginia creeper and Boston ivy. So we will link that, and we'll show that footage. But the draping of the fronds of the Virginia creeper was just so beautiful. It's
It is.
very elegant.
They are. They're great, elegant plants. They don't end up like an unstuffed mattress on the top of the fence.
So the next classic Stephen Ryan alternative creeper moment is the hedge. Is it not, Stephen?
Well, yes, the hedge as a support.
Yes.
Was in fact what we're talking about.
Can I just say, not seeing much in this hedge, Stephen Ryan.
No, you're not. But we did take some footage earlier in the year of a plant called Bomarea salsilla, and we'll go back to looking at that. But I just wanted to mention the hedge itself.
Oh yes, okay.
Yeah, why not? Rhaphithamnus spinosa, which is a Chilean shrub, has nasty thorns on it, so you're not going to push your way through it. And it's a bit of horticultural tautology, because Rhaphithamnus means spiny bush, spinosa means spiny. So
Spiny bush spiny.
Yes, it's a spiny bush, or something like that. It gets little blue flowers on it, blue berries. It's quite pretty when it does all those things.
Are they edible? Is that?
No.
I'm thinking of the Chilean guava.
Yeah, no. It's well, as far as I know, it's not edible. When it fruits next time, I'll
We
get
can
you to
try.
taste it.
All right, well, let's step back in time and look at this glorious hedge in summer.
All right. This plant, Bomarea salsilla, is a great way to spice up a hedge. It's a completely herbaceous perennial climber. It grows through the spring, flowers in the late spring, early summer, and then it will die right down to ground level again, so then you can trim the hedge without trimming the plant. So, flowering hedge. The interesting thing with this Bomarea is that when the flowering spike gets to the point of flowering, the heads of flowers tend to hang out of the hedge, which makes it sort of all the more obvious. It doesn't flower right in the centre. So it's a fabulous plant for this sort of purpose. Now, as far as hardiness is concerned, Bomarias are reasonably cold tolerant, but they won't go down below 0 terribly much. Some of them come from in the Andes in South America, so they can cope with a little bit of cold. They do like a moist, cool root run, but under the hedge they'll stay nice and cool, and you may just have to give them a little bit of water in the summer before they die down. Once they've actually died down, they don't actually mind drying out either, so reasonably easy plant to manage. Now, like most climbing plants, the reason it does hang out of the hedge, of course, is that it's trying to attract pollinators, and of course climbing plants by nature run up something else to get to the light, so that their foliage can get light at the top, but they don't need it down low, and the flowers can then sit out there and attract the birds.
How beautiful and how interesting. So it's not very dense in the hedge, is it? And I guess that's the point.
No, that's the point. You don't want something that's going to swamp the hedge or cover it too much. You just want something that is a happy incident. So as you walk past, you'll see these clusters of lovely flowers poking out of the hedge. Some people might well think it's the hedge's flowers.
Yeah.
But there you go.
And you've got such things scattered about in the hedges in your garden. So I guess it's important to remember that it's quite dry in the root ball of the hedge where the tubers, if it's a tuberous plant, is going to be living.
Yep, exactly. And it's also shady and cool. And of course, most climbers in nature grow under something. I mean, they don't grow on sheds and fences in nature. They grow under something and they grow up through it. So most climbing plants have their roots down in the shade.
Now, Bomarea, the common name is climbing
Alstroemeria,
isn't it? Is it the same family? The same type
they're closely related. The Alstroemerias have flowers with odd-shaped petals. The Bomarias have flowers with even petals, so they have a different flower morphology, but they're in the same plant family. I'm happy just to stick with Bomarea though. I mean, it's shorter, easier to spell than Alstroemeria, so why do we need to complicate the issue, really?
True. And I have one that bloomed, which I'll drop the picture in, and you have a different coloured one as well. Which
yes, I've got another variety as well. So it's a genus of plants that I like to collect, and I might add, just keep in mind that there are some Bomarias that aren't in fact even climbers, so there are some herbaceous perennial ones.
Interesting. And I did notice that this has just begun its yearly climb, so we'll come down and show you it's not even spring, it's still winter.
Yeah, it's still winter, so they get moving in the winter and they'll flower in high spring.
Well, given that we've looked at one duality, using a herbaceous perennial tuber, if that is not a tautology.
No, that's fine.
We should go and have a look at one at your nursery that does not a dissimilar thing.
Yeah, what a good idea.
Now, I'm glad we're here, Stephen, because I have oft admired this creeper, which it's midwinter now, and perhaps is not at its best.
In fact, it's deciduous, so it's bare sticks, yes. So the Heteropterys is dormant now.
So, we'll get to that in a minute, but it also demonstrates your cunning succession planting. Not succession planting,
well, it is sort of successional planting, but it's using the same space for different plants that will perform at different times of the year. So that's exactly it.
So let's start with the bigger creeper. What is this?
Yes, well, that's Heteropterys angustifolia, or I think it's now Heteropterys Glabra, but anyhow, it is a heteropterys and it comes from supposedly subtropical Brazil.
Not subtropical today, I'm here to tell you.
Yes, it's not. And I bought it as a plant from the very first Botanical Gardens plant sale at Melbourne Botanic Gardens with a label on it that had a name, and I knew nothing about the plant, but I couldn't help myself.
So excellent.
I bought it.
That.
Yeah, I think we should all do that. Buy something you've never seen before, have no idea what it is, take it home, grow it, learn about it, and if it's boring, you can pull it out.
Or it dies. So you didn't know if it was going to survive here?
No idea. So this was a trial plant, and it's obviously settled in perfectly well. It may in fact not be deciduous in warmer climates, so it might be a more semi-evergreen shrub or climber in more tropical type climes. But it certainly goes deciduous here, has its yellow flowers in the summer, its red-winged seeds start to come in a little after Christmas, and it looks great right up until the autumn. In the meantime, the Tropaeolum starts.
Yes, now we've talked about this before. This is the most amazing plant from Chile.
Yeah, so it's Tropaeolum tricolor, which means it has 3 colours, easily worked out.
Wow.
It's a tuberous plant, so it has a tuber underneath it that it dies down to, so I need to keep it really dry in the summer. In the winter months it grows, it flowers after midwinter, it starts to come into bloom. It'll still be in flower probably around about early to mid-spring, so that by that time the Heteropterys will be coming on board.
Yeah. And it's stunning. And we talked about hedges before, but this is also a great plant for giving you interest in hedges, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Because it dies down in the summer, you get the colour in the winter. Your hedge isn't growing all that fast then anyway, so you're unlikely to need to trim the hedge.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the Tropaeolum dies back, you can start pruning it.
Yeah, and we actually, I think in our video we showed repotting this, and the tubers are sort of like small sweet potatoes. So the key is that they need to be dry in summer.
Yeah.
So in planting them in the root ball of a hedge, it's perfect conditions.
As long as you don't get a really, really wet summer. I have had them rot even under the hedge, and that's why I always keep a good core stock of them back, growing in a container that sits at the ground, and then when it dies down I can pick the container up, take it away and put it in the shed.
Aha, well, I am glad we covered this, and I hope that you sell it. Do you have this in...
Yeah, I sell the Tropaeolum. I also sell the Heteropterys as well.
That's what I was more interested in. Well, I think we should go and have a look at something else that's cunning in the creeper world.
Why not?
So another theme of yours, Stephen, is that seasonality of planting. So you've got 2 or sometimes 3 things basically growing up the same space that flower differently.
Yes, exactly. It can be a little complex to work out, but you know, if you really think it through, you can get climbers that do things all year round.
Yeah.
So again, like we've done with some of the things I've grown through permanent structural shrubs or trees, if you're going to grow multiple climbers together, the important thing is, one, make sure the root systems are slightly separated so they're not actually competing too heavily with each other.
Yes.
They need to have appropriate vigour in juxtaposition with each other. So if you've got a seriously vigorous climber, then it can sometimes swamp out the less seriously strong climber. So you need to get those things together. And
not
then,
that
of course,
simple then, not that simple.
Not always, but then I've always been a great experimenter anyway. So the issue is to be prepared to try things and see what happens. So we'll have a look at a couple of plants now that in fact seem to be working quite well and giving me interesting different seasonality.
Okay, let's have a look. Well, continuing our creeper odyssey, Stephen, I guess it's appropriate that it's glacial, freezing and raining.
Yes.
Tell us why.
All right. Now, here we have 2 climbers cohabitating, so to speak. We have this one, which is in flower now in the winter, which is Clematis napaulensis, and we have talked about it before.
Which we will link below.
Yep. And it's a winter flowering clematis that has a rather bizarre habit of being summer deciduous, which makes it sort of look pretty scruffy and ordinary in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
So we plant it with this particular plant, or I have, which is Lonicera hildebrandiana, which is the giant Burmese honeysuckle.
Which we've also made a film about, which we will link.
Yeah, and the thing is that the honeysuckle flowers in high summer when the clematis is dormant. It is evergreen, so its large glossy green leaves more or less hide the rather redundant look of the clematis in the summer. Yeah. So they work off each other.
And then in winter, which is the time where not much is in bloom, you get these really beautiful blooms.
Yeah, and it has the advantage of being bird attractant because the birds love the nectar from these flowers at a time of the year when they need it. And when it finishes flowering, it gets these fabulous fluffy seed pods, which are gorgeous in the spring.
There you go. So this is a clever way of basically growing 2 things together that do different things at different times of year.
Yeah, so one will hide the other when it's looking awful, and then the rest of the year you've got flowers or seed pods or something else happening.
So there you go, a great way to think about planting creepers. Beautiful, and there's quite a, well, I don't know, there's a few winter flowering clematis, isn't there?
Yeah, there are a number of those, which is very, very useful, and most of them are fairly cold hardy. So you've got napaulensis, you've got the cirrhosa varieties, and you've also got one called fabulously fascicular flora, which is a hell of a mouthful, but they're all basically winter flowering clematis. So they are very useful if you want to get that extra seasonality. It just so happens I've got a plant of one of the forms of Clematis cirrhosa here. I thought just throwing the name out there might not be enough. So this is what it looks like. It's got a little cream bell with purple freckles, and funnily enough this variety is actually called Freckles. So this particular variety was in fact raised in England. The species comes from the Balearic Islands, so off the coast of Spain, and it's comparatively cold hardy. It's also reasonably heat tolerant in the summer as long as its roots are down in the shade, and it's more or less solidly evergreen, this one.
Stephen Ryan,
yes,
climbers, creepers extraordinaire. That was very interesting.
And I hope people got not only some useful tips on how to grow climbers and where to use them, but also some interesting ones that they might not have come across before.
And wherever you are trying to find things that can do some of the things that you've been doing, particularly with this fabulous asparagus.
Yes, the good old Semele.
Now, I must mention that we made a video about the whole grape family, which obviously
Yes.
includes self-clingers, which we will link. And we made a video about the climbing hydrangea, which is also something to bear in mind for an unusual choice in terms of wall covering.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, they're a group of plants that are often ignored by people, sadly.
Which are beautiful. Well, that has been fabulous. We've been filming some of these things for months, so I'm glad we finally got it all together.
Yes, it's done
What could
now.
we do next week, Stephen Ryan?
Well, it'll be something different and hopefully something that you'll be interested in.
So do hit subscribe because we post every week on a Friday, so follow our adventures, and until then, we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye all.